Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the October 20th. The date today is 10/20/2020, ironically. Anyway, good morning to everybody and welcome to our staff meeting on Tuesday. I will hand this over to Tom Stoltz, but before, again, Commissioner Howell is joining us remotely for his last few days of quarantining. Commissioner Howell, welcome again.
Thank you so much, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. Tom, I'll hand it over to you.
Very good, sir. Good morning. Singular item today. We're going to talk about legislative platform. Our lobbyist is here. Lindsay is on the phone. And Mike, is Akeem going to lead this? Or are you going to lead?
I think Akeem could start it, but I'm jumping in. Or it doesn't.
So this will be the singular item, sir, and then anything the commission wants to talk about after this is over would be fine.
Okay. Good morning, Akeem.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Akeem Ashford, Communications Director, here to just kind of present you a broad 30,000-foot overview of the legislative process and where we are at the moment. First, let's kind of go over last year's platform that you all adopted. That's that placard that you have. Item 1 that was approved was to strengthen and enhance the Medicaid safety net through enhanced rates for behavioral health. 2, support regional state mental hospital facilities, including one here in Sedgwick County. 3 was to address the behavioral health needs of the uninsured and underinsured. 4, support community crisis center funding. 5 was the nuisance abatement authority for Sedgwick County. And 6 was to create a charter commission. Through my talks with department heads as well as you all, I sent out an email early September and got it back just a couple weeks ago and kind of helped compile a list of some wants and some needs throughout the county and then as well as from you all. And so we'll go through that next. Also in the bottom of that handout that you guys have is the joint partner statement. That is the agreement between Sedgwick County, the Chamber of Commerce, and the City of Wichita. And if you read there, it says 1 of that agenda was to support behavioral health. 2, to support a comprehensive state transportation program, including the North Junction. And then 3 was the workforce development initiatives promoted by the Chamber. Along with that, you guys also approved issues of importance. And so I'll read those to you all. 1 was to refund funding from the state gaming revenues to juvenile detention facilities. 2 was to increase funding for state mandated community corrections, adult intensive supervision programs. 3 was to increase funding for community corrections adult residence centers. 4 was to support legislation aimed at reducing recidivism and domestic violence offenders. 5 was to amend CORA to protect the privacy of detention officers. 6 was to address influx of suspended licenses. 7, scrap metal database, support efforts by the Kansas Attorney General's office to adequately fund and maintain a scrap metal database. 8 was to expand gaming, and 9 was loan forgiveness. So those 9 were the issues of importance to go along with the platform that you all approved last year. So through those talks, I came up with about 10 total things from you all as well as from those department heads. And so that's what we're going to go over now. Kate, do you have that document? Can you pull that up for us? Okay, so 1 was suspended driver's license reform. That was to support allowing drivers with a suspended license to receive a restricted status. 2 was the property tax bill. That is to support requiring transparency when increasing property tax fund, so that would require you all to require public hearings and publications in newspapers. 3, Medicaid expansion. Commissioner who brought this one up wants the language to read that the commission does not support expanding Medicaid. 4, reordering of ballots. So this would basically put those contested races at the top of the ballot and the non-contested races at the bottom of the ballot. We have the Vote Anywhere bill. and I know Jason's here to kind of help me out with this one. From my understanding that it did pass, but it just was not adopted by the Secretary of State. But Jason's here to kind of provide more on that. 6, right to a speedy trial. This is what District Attorney Mark Bennett presented to you all, I think about 2 months ago, changing the restrictions from 90 days to 150 days. So kind of making that long term as the effects of COVID kind of continue. There was a ask from the Department of Corrections to.
Akeem, just a second.
Yes, sir.
I think 6, what does that say? It doesn't go from 90 days to 6 months. It goes.
To 150 days.
No,
Is that what it says?
It's currently 150 days.
Right. So to continue that 150 days, sir. That's what Mark Bennett presented on.
I think that's contrary. I think he wants it either eliminated or expanded way beyond that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not.
First of all,
and
Chairman, we're getting hard copies of this to you. Kate's out printing them. right
Okay,
now.
because I
Apologize you
can't
didn't have
read
those.
that.
And I know Mark has an ongoing discussion regarding speedy trial. It's a huge issue for him. And I do agree with you, it's past 150. I don't know what it's going to be. We'll probably want clarity before we make this part of our platform on what, Mark will write this part for us, I'm pretty sure.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, Mike Pepin, County Councilor, in talking with Mr. Bennett, they are working through their District Attorneys Association and County Councilors, the County Attorneys Association to draft legislation. So I think probably the only language we would have in this is to support efforts by the District Attorneys, Mark Bennett and the District Attorneys Association to adjust the speedy trial provisions to deal with the backflow of cases with COVID or something. I mean, we'd have a very broad statement. I don't think we'll get into the very specifics of what Mr. Bennett would like, but.
Okay, yeah, we could support the district attorney's efforts to whatever they think is the fairest timing on
They
this.
may want to suspend the legislation. I
Right.
mean, as Mark explained when he was down here, speedy trial rights are governed by the Constitution. And it just so happens that Kansas has statutorily put in some speedy trial rights, and I think that's what they want to suspend. But anyway.
Right. And I did reach out to Mark yesterday, District Attorney Bennett, and asked him if it was be beneficial for us to include that on our legislative agenda, and his response was affirmative that yes, it would. So, and I don't know, I don't want to be hyper focused on this item, but is there any from the state legislators, previous being Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Howell and what you might weigh in, is this would be an obstacle to take as an issue? Jason? All right.
No, sir. That makes perfect sense, and I don't think we present issues for the county at all.
Okay. Do you have any opinion, Commissioner O'Donnell or Commissioner Howell?
No.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, we can move on.
Yes, sir. Item 7, Department of Corrections has an ask of supporting realignment order number 44. This would support restructure of community corrections agencies who share expenses, including staff salaries between adult and juvenile budgets. Removing juvenile supervision from joint programs would result in significant cuts to programming and staff efficiencies across the state. Sedgwick County Department of Corrections does not agree with any proposed realignment that removes the juvenile budget or supervision practices away from the Kansas Department of Corrections. So that was an ask from that department. To include juvenile funding, the department would like to support an increase in juvenile funding in addressing moderate to high-risk youth in the effort to keep them from going into state correctional facilities. Elor sent over an ask as well. She would like to expand or to include 911 dispatchers to read as first responders. And then 10, broadband access, support giving broadband internet access to all citizens of Sedgwick County. So those are kind of the items that I was gathering from department heads as well as you all in our conversations. So.
Okay. Can you clarify what number 9 means?
So I did ask these department heads to come in to help. It was kind of a late notice for me to actually get them here. But my understanding is that they want to be designated as first responders. So those 911 dispatchers would then be designated as first responders. I can definitely get you more information on that as we go along. So,
Okay. All right, Commissioners, Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for putting together this list. You know, I have to ask why we would want to put something on our legislative platform that says we don't support something. Last year, I guess I'll point out that 4 of the 6 issues on our legislative platform were related to mental health. And Medicaid expansion, according to NAMI and a couple of other sources, NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Medicaid expansion would help those with mental health services. 1 in 5 people in the U.S. have a mental health condition, but only half get needed treatment. Better coverage for care will help people with mental health conditions. Medicaid is the largest payer for mental health and substance use condition services, providing health coverage to more than 1 in 4 American adults with a serious mental illness. When states expand Medicaid, more people with mental health conditions can get the coverage they need to access vital care. Medicaid expansion removes barriers for people with mental illness by allowing them to qualify based on income rather than a disability determination.
All right. I liked our last year's 1 through 6 items. I think they're consistent with what our intent was last year. I think building on that and maybe just adding speedy trial remember we did have a vote. We were frustrated with our voting anywhere legislation that didn't go anywhere. Yeah.
If I could just update on a couple of things. I think last year the commission as a whole took the position that expansion of Medicaid was a state issue.
Right.
And county really didn't want to weigh in on that. And
Yeah.
the vote anywhere, and Jason, welcome to jump in on this. We got that legislation passed. The Secretary of State, but part of that happening was the Secretary of State had to adopt rules and regulations allowing it to happen. And
Right.
as of before COVID, that hadn't happened. I think we were working with the Secretary of State to try to ensure that this would be done before the next election, but I don't know if Jason has any update on that or not. But
Jason's coming up. Are we not voting anywhere right now? People all going to Interest Arena?
Sort of are. Thank you,
Sort
Mr.
of.
Chairman. Jason Watkins Public Strategies. Yeah, the counselor's correct. That legislation was passed actually 2 sessions ago. And, but the secretary did need to promulgate rules and regs. That didn't happen. The secretary was actually sued, I think by a group that the Senate Minority Leader, Anthony Hensley, was a part of. Judge out of Topeka dismissed that suit. I think there's been a lot of conversation between folks in Sedgwick County government and Secretary Schwab. I think he's been pretty forthright in that he didn't want to try this in a large election like we're now participating in, but was also, I think, said he was giving his word that they will get to work on this and that this should be ready for next year's elections, so what will be local elections. So I don't know that there'd necessarily be anything that we'd need to do on the legislative agenda, but there was a bill last year that Representative Carpenter introduced and that Commissioner Howe testified on that would have forced a certain timeline on the secretary in terms of rules and regs related to that statute.
Okay. Well, thanks. So it might be a moot point to have it on our agenda. Okay. again, then from my perspective, and I'm open for any more conversation, I would like, I'm okay with suspended driver's license comment, but I think we can take out, just include the number 6 and number 10. And I guess if 9, I need to understand it better. I just don't want to water it down. I'm not sure what that means, if that's just a formality, so a 911 operator can be called a first responder.
Yeah, Chairman, I don't want to speak for Laura, and at some point we'll need to hear from her, but she'd been passionate about having her team be part of the first responder system. There's validity to that because of the stress they put up with, the kind of lifestyle they have to lead. It's 24/7 holiday. I just don't know from her perspective if there's technical or beneficial reasons, or if it is more of a philosophical kind of change. We'll get some clarity on that and report back to you.
Okay. All right. And I think broadband, number 10, my last comment is I think that's important. That's kind of a recent development. There seems to be a lot of funding thrown at it for executing broadband statewide, but for sure in our county. Yeah, Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few comments on the main 6 items that we had from previous year. I think all those are still valid. I don't see that we would want to change any of those. We need to work with our partners and see if that's still the top 3 issues for our partners. I believe that they probably will be, but we need to verify that working with the Chamber and with the Workforce Alliance and the City of Wichita and so forth. As far as the other items, the broadband access number 10 on your list, I think should be included on the front page rather than as additional items. I think that is so important right now, especially with the fact that we've got so many students that aren't in school, that they're being handicapped by their inability to have broadband out in the remote areas, especially in Commissioner O'Donnell's district and my district. The item 2 on the additional areas on the property tax bill, as I recall, last year when we discussed this, we wanted a few tweaks to that rather than exactly what went forward to the legislature, because the requirements of all of the different mailings and so forth were fairly expensive. So I just want to make sure that we review that again. Mr. Papoon, do you have something on that?
Yeah, that was Senate Bill 294 last year, which had quite a bit of momentum going through the legislature. And I think Lindsay, our CFO, Lindsay Povesell, is on the line and can address that bill to remind the commissioners some of the pros and cons of that legislation.
You're on, Lindsay.
Okay, sorry. Good morning. So the bill last year, I guess, Mike, can you clarify? Do you want me to talk about the original bill or what kind of happened through the session and where it wound up?
I don't, either one, Lindsay, I don't care.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about it at a high level. So at a high level, the property tax lid basically was repealed. And so basically the county clerk would be required to issue all taxing entities within the county their revenue neutral rate by June 15th. And essentially that rate would be calculating last year's property tax levy based on this year's assessed value. And so that would then generate a mill levy rate. And that would be essentially what's presumed to be acceptable in the budget without any further action. If the board of that taxing entity, except for schools, this did not apply to schools, but if the board of any entity wanted to increase taxes, let's say it's a city and they annex property, or if the value increased because something changed in use or something like that, the bill would not allow for adjustments like that, like the property tax lid does. Instead, if they wanted to increase it for any reason because of those changes or to fund additional services, then the taxing entity would have to let the clerk know by July 15th of their intent to do that. And then the clerk would send out a notification to the taxpayer with certain information, what their property value is, what the tax rate would be, what the revenue neutral rate would be, and all of that, along with public hearing information. And then it would basically delay the calendar so that those public hearings could be held by mid-September. And then the taxing entity could approve whatever tax levy they want after they've had that public hearing and that notice has been mailed out. And if you remember when we talked last year, based on the way the format was prescribed in the proposal, the law would actually require basically $150,000 estimated Sedgwick County expense to do that for all the taxing entities each year. And so we were hoping at the time to get some modifications to that mailer and also to get some modifications to the calendar. And then I think COVID hit and we never really worked through those details. And so hopefully that provides enough info, but let me know if I missed anything.
Well, good, Lindsay. I appreciate that. Reminded me. I knew that we supported the bill and its idea behind the bill. It's just a few tweaks that we wanted to be provided on that bill, and such as the dates and also we have a lot of ways of notifying the public that are a lot cheaper than sending mailings out. So I think that us continuing to support that with a few tweaks would be important. As far as some of the other things that are on this proposed, I'm going to need more information on the speedy trial, Department of Corrections, juvenile funding, and 911 dispatchers before that I could really weigh in on those. But other than that, I think we're on the right track. I appreciate it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other comments?
And maybe, Chairman, either Jason can come or Akeem, if they know, can we get a basic timeline for the commission on how this process is going to go? We're on October 20, and how are we going to mold this together, and when would a final product need to be done in best case?
If I can butt in just quickly, I think last year we adopted our platform in early December, just to give you a time frame of what we did last year. I don't know how that works with Jason, but that was our process last year.
Yeah, thank you. The sooner the better. One of the situations that we ran into last year, adopting the agenda a little bit later, is that once we got into session, and the two commissioners that have served in the legislature are very familiar with the Office of the Reviser. That's who writes the bills. They're attorneys, they write the bills. They've got a new software system. I don't think they have the same number of personnel that they had certainly when I went there in 2005. It's taking a long, long time to get bills written. And so we really faced a challenge last session on the Charter Commission and the nuisance abatement in that we were ready to have hearings, but we didn't have legislation. So as I was telling Akeem this morning, the sooner this agenda can get adopted, the sooner I can get to work with Mike and the folks in Topeka to get the bills written.
Okay. Jason, a point of clarity. Reading our card here at the bottom, number 2, I think with the efforts that Secretary Lorenz has been doing, I think we could leave it as we continue to support a comprehensive state transportation program. We don't need to put in North Junction, and we can just be supportive of what she's doing at this, or take it out.
Is there enough train down the track now to remove
Right.
it?
It's every 2 years. I mean, it's that ball's rolling, right? So I think that mission accomplished in my observation, but.
Yeah, so you have a 10-year comprehensive transportation funding with 2-year cycles of determining projects.
Yeah. So likely, I mean, we're going to rehash this a little bit, either one-on-one, whatever, but I think that one could be mission accomplished, and you get a smiley face for that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I do have some comments at some
Yeah,
point.
okay,
So,
go ahead. Yeah, Commissioner Howell, thank you.
well, thank you for the chance to speak. So I'd like to go through a couple of these and make some comments. I would say that if the nature of the item is that we could actually, anticipate how to write that bill and exactly what we're advocating for, those items are much more viable on this platform than items that are I guess, just ideological. And let me give you an example. So, number one, the suspended driver's license reform, that's a piece of legislation that almost passed last year. I went up to Topeka and I testified twice on that. In fact, it passed, I think, one body of the legislature, and I think it would have passed to the governor, but the pandemic, I guess, stalled that piece of legislation, similar to the property tax bill. But having said that, I think the suspended driver's license issue actually is a really big issue for Sedgwick County. We have a huge number of suspended drivers in Sedgwick County, and a lot of them feel very desperate. They don't seem to have a way to solve their problem, and a lot of them make the wrong choice to drive without insurance as a consequence. I just think that this is an item that impacts a lot of people, maybe directly, but also indirectly. And we talk about criminal justice reform. There's a lot of support for this, especially from people who are struggling financially. And I think this is an item that definitely belongs on a platform. I did this by myself last year, and I didn't seem to have support from the commission. I think it would have passed, and I think it's unfortunate that it did not pass. But we have a chance this year, as a commission, to support this, and I think we should leave this on the platform. Second of all, the property tax piece of legislation, it would have passed. And I would say that the issue of notifying taxpayers is a baked-in cost. I think that everyone understands that tax levies do go up slowly, but there's been a big debate going on for years whether or not, if the mill levy is the same and the property values increase, whether that's a tax increase or not. And I think that will settle, this legislation will settle that forever. A tax increase would be defined that if you take in more tax dollars, then that's a tax increase, regardless of property values. But people want to be notified. And I think that one of my frustrations is that when people get their property tax bill, they don't see the details they just know that there's just one number at the bottom of that bill. I know they can go back for 1 year and see, they can see their tax collections for 1 year, but it doesn't go back very far, and it's actually not very transparent. So I think this is actually really great because it would expose to taxpayers which entity it is that actually is increasing their taxes. And I think that this would actually be good for Sedgwick County. I do expect this will pass this year. So rather than oppose it, I think we ought to be on board. If we want to have a chance to steer that legislation, we need to keep this on our list. But if the issue is notification, I don't think we're going to win that argument, in my opinion. And I would remind everyone that the state, the KAC and other organizations, League of Municipalities, their number one priority for years and years was to repeal the tax lid. This actually does do that. So it does empower municipalities to govern as needed with tax levies as they need, but they just have to inform the taxpayers what's going on. I think this is about transparency, and I do support that. So I think this should stay on here, but I don't know we ought to up front take a position that we're not going to notify taxpayers when there's a tax increase. I think that would be a mistake to do that. Issue of so again, those first two bills, by the way, are very simple in that fact that I know how to write those bills. They're going to be written anyway, but I can envision exactly what's in those pieces of legislation, and I know how to testify on those, and I expect they're going to pass. Number 3 is more of a policy position. There's a lot of organizations, including the Wichita Chamber and the KAC and LKM, and virtually every city has this on their platform already. And I think we need to speak to it, especially knowing that we may be different than other organizations. And the reason I would oppose Medicaid expansion primarily is because this is a tax increase. It's at least $150 million first year. It's very expensive, and it provides, if you will, a benefit for people who are able-bodied adults without dependents. And so this is a very special class of people. If they have dependents, there's options available to them. But able-bodied adults without dependents do have access to health care through the Affordable Care Act. And in other words, where the money might come from, it's been opined in the past that money would actually come from Medicare potentially to help fund Medicaid. And that's a problem. I don't want to harm seniors, and I don't know that we should be giving a new benefit to people who have the ability to help themselves. And so I just oppose Medicaid expansion in principle. I don't think it's the right strategy. If we want to lower the cost of healthcare, there are other options available, like competition across the state lines, tort reform, portability in HSAs, for example. So I think there are solutions to high cost of medical care, but Medicaid expansion is not the right answer. And in terms of reordering the ballots, again, I know how to write that bill. It's very simple. We talked about this at Canvas numerous times. The issue at hand is the voter drop-off. If you look at the highest item on the ballot versus the items at the bottom of the ballot, you'll see about a 20% drop-off. People don't get to the end of the ballot for whatever reason. Maybe they don't want to vote on those races, but maybe they just don't realize there's contested races at the end of the ballot. And so by reordering the ballot, at least their voter fatigue of having to go through many, many pages of uncontested races and potentially having them miss opportunities to vote on contested races will be addressed by changing the order of the ballot by moving those contested races to the top. So again, I know how to write that bill, and I think it'd be very easy to testify on that bill, and I would expect it would pass. I have talked to members of the elections committee, and they seem to be interested in that bill. The Vote Anywhere bill, I don't think there's anything to do on that. I have no opinion on right to speedy trial. I support the district attorney on that one. Going on down, I don't really have a lot of opinion on the rest of those, but I would just say this: if we know how to write the legislation, it's very clear. I guess I would make an example of what's wrong with number 10. I don't know how to write that bill. I'm not sure exactly what we're advocating for. I'm not sure what would be in that piece of legislation. So that's the problem. I call that squishy in that fact. I know it's a policy statement. I support what it's trying to do, but I don't know how to write the piece of legislation. I don't know who to go to start that process. And so to me, it's a little bit high in the sky type of stuff. It doesn't really come down to exactly how we would pass that legislation and where the funding would come from and that type of thing. So I would much rather keep items on our list that are discrete in terms of we know how to write the legislation and we know what we're testifying for. The only exception to that would be the Medicaid expansion, which I think is it's a policy statement because primarily every governing body in the state of Kansas has issued, if you will, an opinion on Medicaid expansion. We should not ignore that truth. And so I'll stand by for questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Howell, you make a good point on number 10. I think, I know Commissioner Dennis has been involved in broadband. The federal and the state money is rolling, and I'm not sure, he makes a good point, but it's really not a item that we need to write legislation on. It's just more of we support it. It's kind of going on unless you want, if you feel.
I know Representative Seward is the head of the committee that's working the broadband issues, and we need to make sure that we support what he's doing up there. I don't know if it needs to be something that we want to have as a bill, so much as we want to show that we have support for it.
Right.
So somehow, I would think our legislative platform would allow us to say we support something rather than needing a bill for it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. We probably need to just follow up with Joe and others and see how much we need to formalize it or not. We can do that as we muddle through this. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner Howell, I guess I'll have to remind you that I did support you on the suspended driver's license, so you were not the only commissioner who supported that last year. So let me remind you of that. On Medicaid expansion, when you say able-bodied adults, able body means a lot of different things. And those individuals who may be physically able to do something but have a mental illness and are unable to afford their medications, so they go off their medications, and then they're not so able-bodied anymore because they don't have the mental capacity to handle things. So I would have to argue that if we only have so many items, and I remember last year, there were only so many spots on this card that we could advocate for, why we would put something on here advocating against. Why wouldn't we be more proactive to advocate for things that we can win instead of...
So let me respond if it's okay. Thank you, Commissioner Cruz, for those comments. And to the rest of you, I would
wasn't
say
finished,
we ought to
Commissioner Howell.
have
Commissioner
our
Howell.
palm card sort of-
Commissioner Howell.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
wasn't
She
finished.
wasn't finished.
I'm so
wasn't
sorry.
finished.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I wonder, of the 6 or however many things that we're going to be placing on here, making sure that we stick to what is most important to us. And I do believe that last year, this card states plain and simple in the text that's here, our priority issues, and 4 of them addressed behavioral health. And so for us to say that we're going to advocate against something that would be advocating for mental health, I just don't understand why we would want to do that. So, Commissioner Howell, I would love to hear from you now that I'm finished speaking.
Thank you for that opportunity to speak. I'd like to just remind us that our strategy last year and the year before and going back for a number of years now has been to highlight those items that are basically palm card items. The very small card with 4 or 5 items listed there that we can actually lobby for to pass that legislative session. And so these policy statements, even Medicaid expansion, I would agree, along with broadband access, those are policy statements that I don't know how to write that bill. Now, maybe Representative Seiwert has a piece of legislation that he would like to have us understand more deeply. Maybe we can get on board with that one. But as written, this looks like it's a policy position, and I don't think they belong on the palm card. Okay, these are back page items. These are things that our lobbyist Jason would know that that's our position. If anybody wants to go into a deep dive and see the position of Sedgwick County, they would go to the back page or the second page or a supplemental document. They would see the position of Sedgwick County. Or if the item comes up during the session, our lobbyist is clear exactly what our position is because we've given it to him in writing. These are not necessarily the items that you would hand to a legislator in the elevator as you're walking by, or as you have just a 1-minute conversation with the legislator. And so the items that belong on that card are the items that we could write those pieces of legislation. I would recommend the suspended driver's license is that type. The speedy trial is probably going to be that type. And the reordering of ballots might be on that list. And so these are the items that belong on that short list. The things I expect at the end of the session, we could say, we were very successful. Out of our 4 or 5 items we listed, we got 80% of them done again this year. We've been very successful with the strategy. These policy positions don't belong on that card. They belong on the back page or in the background. And so again, I agree with you, Commissioner Cruz. These are items that don't belong on that card and on the front page. And so in terms of strategy, we ought to put things on that short list. There are things that are bills that are moving in this bills that are currently moving in the legislature that are easy to define and easy to testify for. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, thank you, Commissioner Howell. You make a good point on a couple things. One thing that I think that we did wrong on our palm card last year is that if you flip it over, the backside is kind of wasted. Listing 5 commissioners with all the same phone numbers does give our email addresses, but and then we have an awful lot of white space on there. I think these items that are other issues ought to be on our palm card on the back side of this so that everybody can see what all of our issues are. So I think we can make a more efficient way of displaying this if we reorder or we redesign our palm card this coming year. But I guess that's all I need to say right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. It's been some healthy dialogue, and I think what the next step is maybe get Hakeem, you and even Jason, and maybe Mr. Papoon and Tom to visit with each of us and kind of hear us out, try to get a little more a feel for what is really important to some and what is maybe, and that way you can explain some of the staff positions of why it's there as well. And let's just try to do that and respectful for what Jason's talked about as probably something we get done formally approved sooner than December 1st type world, and based on also what Commissioner House talking about with the timing to try to get stuff written, or at least a draft of a bill written. So, does anybody else have any? Or you feel that okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay
Absolutely.
with that?
Yes, sir.
I'm getting positive nods from Jason and Mike and Tom. So, Tom, you have anything to add on this?
I'm just looking at the calendar, Chairman. Thanksgiving is on the 26th this year, so we would have, we'll need a meeting, a Wednesday meeting to ratify this. So we're at the 18th, and of course, we had talked about special meetings, of
Correct.
which we're quite good at now, that we could do anytime.
Right.
But I really think it ought to be a goal to get this ratified before Thanksgiving. I
Yeah,
don't know if
I'd agree.
Jason,
I agree.
So we'll schedule these individual meetings and probably just plan on bringing this topic back at every staff meeting for the next couple of weeks and just
Yeah,
kind of
that sounds
massaging and refreshing. So, okay.
Sounds fun. Yeah, and for the public and the commissioners, we've with the CARES world, we've talked about having more special meetings, mainly just on CARES. But if we need to, I'd like to see if we can get this in our regular Wednesday meetings. But we have some scheduling conflicts, so we probably ought to. Kate, have we released what we talked about with potential dates of meetings in November? At least to the commissioners. I think, well, let's make sure that everybody has a draft of what our potential schedule is as we finish up October and go into November. Okay, Mr. Papoon, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I will say that last year on the two pieces of legislation, nuisance abatement authority and charter commission, we've already got that legislation drafted, and actually through tremendous effort on the part of Mr. Watkins, we got that through, I think, the Senate in each case. Unless the commissioners have an objection to that, we can look at that again, tweak it, and have that ready to go next week if there's if there's any advantage for our lobbyists to have it ready to go and up there and pre-filed or however we want to do it, because
Right.
that's already there and ready to go.
Okay, that's good. So we can probably get this task accomplished sooner than later. I know that District Attorney Bennett was also going to speak onto the REAP memberships, which is, what is that, 10 counties or so. I think REAP was unaware of the speedy trial impact, so he was going to update them. So there may be a little more regional feelings on the speedy trial potential elimination or modification. So, okay, is there any other comments? Okay, I don't see any. Thanks, Hakeem.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for
Chairman,
the
before we
explanation.
depart
Yes.
the topic, just to mention, this is something to think about. We still have, regarding platform, there's a lot of things moving at the federal level regarding stimulus relief. And of course, we're all hoping that something will pan out there. But if not, I think our platform for next year maybe should have something with COVID and supporting our businesses and especially the small businesses. So that's just something, hopefully that will get clarity. And we'll talk with our federal lobbyist about that as well. I just don't want to forget that we still have that phenomena going on. And then I think the concept of testing is going to continue to linger into 21. hopefully not 22, but just some things to consider as we continue this discussion. And then just a quick reminder, Lindsay has reminded me we have a bond sale today. And I know she sent you an email over the weekend on our bond rating status, which we don't get to brag on the organization very much, but this is really good news for Sedgwick County that our bond rating has maintained AAA strength. That's a credit to, of course, Lindsay and her staff and you as commissioners and all of our department heads organizationally that have fiscally managed a budget in what I would call worst of times. So I just wanted to call that out. And then, Lindsay, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Nope, I just wanted to mention the fact that bond sale was today. Thank you.
That's all we had, sir.
Yeah, and congratulations, Lindsay, and the finance department and fellow commissioners to keep our AAA bond rating is quite an accomplishment, and I know it's always been a very positive opinion of Sedgwick County government before my time and during this limited time so far. So I truly challenging times to keep that AAA rating, especially in our unemployment. That was good numbers that our unemployment spiked huge, and now it's coming back down. And so a lot of challenges. So congratulations, Lindsay, and your staff. Please extend our appreciation.
Thank you, I will. We are nerdily excited.
We can hear it in your voice. Okay. All right, everybody. That said, I don't see anything else come before the commission staff meeting this morning, so we will adjourn and we will see you at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you.